The top 4 teams are number 1, Georgia, number 2, Michigan, number 3, TCU, and number 4, Ohio State. And I absolutely love this. I actually think, considering the situation and what went down, this is a nearly perfect top 4. Georgia will play Ohio State in the first round of the college football playoff. TCU will play Michigan. The winners will play each other for the national title. Both games are New Year's Eve. By the way, in case you don't know, that's the 31st of December. Here is what happened and how we got here. It's really, really fun. Last weekend was championship weekend in college football. All the conferences had their conference title game. Going into the weekend, the top 4 was Georgia, Michigan, number 3, TCU, and number 4, USC. 2 games for these 4 teams went as expected. And games for 2 of these teams did not go as I expected. First of all, 2 teams in the top 4 lost. So Georgia won the SEC title game. They beat LSU 50-30. The game wasn't close. Georgia led 35-10 at halftime. Stetson Bennett, Georgia's quarterback, was 23 for 29 passing, had 274 yards, 4 touchdown passes. He dominated. Georgia dominated. It was awesome. I expected Georgia to beat LSU. And then also, as expected, Michigan won. They beat Purdue in the Big Ten title game 43-22. But TCU and USC, they lost their conference title games. And, on Friday night, first of all, the game to open the weekend, in the Pac-12 title game, Utah beat USC 47-24. USC had this golden opportunity to make it into the college football playoff, and they lost to Utah. All they had to do was win, and they got in. And they couldn't make it happen. Frankly, the way to put it is that USC choked. And USC, they only lost 2 games all year, had a great season, but those 2 losses were to Utah. And I think it's kind of fun. I like the way it went down because USC is expected to dominate the Pac-12 now that their head coach is Lincoln Riley. And Utah said, hold up. Not so fast. I don't think your dominance is ready to begin. And I love this because long-term, it's so good for the rise of USC. USC has a legitimate challenger. When they hired Lincoln Riley, they got all these recruits, people transferred in, they've got all this NIL money. The expectation was it's pretty much a guarantee USC is going to dominate the Pac-12 for years to come. They're going to go back to their old prominence. And, Utah beat them twice this year. Deion Sanders just went to Colorado. I like that it's going to be a mystery still whether or not USC can dominate the Pac-12. Look, Colorado and Deion Sanders are going to recruit really hard. They're going to steal recruits away from USC, I believe. And Utah, again, you beat USC twice in the same year. I think Oregon's really good. I go back to this. It's not a guarantee USC is going to dominate the Pac-12. I still think they will long-term. Eventually, they're going to have a team full of Lincoln Riley recruits, not recruited by the old head coach. But I am really, really fired up and kind of excited, actually, that USC lost. I think it's good for the health and the interest level of the Pac-12. Now, I was really sad for USC quarterback Caleb Williams. In this loss to Utah, Caleb Williams gave everything he had. He played beat up. He was running around a ton. He made a ton of ridiculous plays. He made defenders miss and avoided sacks. And if you haven't watched the game, go watch the highlights at least and go watch the incredible plays Caleb Williams made. And if USC had won this football game, then, if they'd remained the top 4 team in college football they were, made it into the college football playoff, they'd be scheduled to play Georgia. If USC had won, I believe Caleb Williams would be guaranteed, basically, to be the Heisman Trophy winner. He still could win. It announces on Saturday. We'll find out who the Heisman Trophy winner is going to be. But ending with a loss, I think, really does hurt Caleb Williams. And maybe they can overlook that. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks who didn't win the national title and didn't have the most glamorous end of their year. Lamar Jackson didn't make a college football playoff. Johnny Manziel didn't win a national title. He won a Heisman Trophy. You can win the Heisman Trophy without winning a national title, but ending with a loss really hurts. And I just want to also say it's pretty crazy USC did lose this football game. They were handed a second chance. They screwed up earlier in the year. They lost to Utah. They blew what I thought was their only chance at making the college football playoff. And then the College Football Playoff Selection Committee said, we'll give you a second chance. And I went, oh my gosh, they're going to make it in. I can't believe it. And they blew it again, oh my gosh. And you can't really blame USC's quarterback, Caleb Williams, for the loss. I mean, USC's defense was awful, had an all-time bad game. They couldn't tackle anybody. And sometimes I talk about Caleb Williams like he's Superman or something, because he does basically everything. He does everything but play defense. And USC's defense cost this program everything, really. A chance at the college football playoff, a chance at really kind of making their name and planting their flag and saying USC is back. Utah's offense had 533 yards, 6 touchdowns, and USC gave up 47 points. You're not going to win, and you can't expect to win giving up 47 points in a game. Now, the other surprise of the weekend, I was shocked USC lost. But the other surprise from championship weekend was that TCU lost. K-State beat TCU in the Big 12 title game 31-28 in overtime. It was a heartbreaking loss. TCU had opportunities. I love TCU quarterback Max Duggan. And the dude fought so hard. He gave everything he had. I have no idea who's going to win the Heisman on Saturday, but what I saw from Max Duggan on Saturday, he was so tired he had to have help get off the field. I'm like, that guy looks like a Heisman Trophy winner. It wouldn't be shocking to me if he won the Heisman Trophy, actually. I think he had between the two quarterbacks who lost, Caleb Williams or Max Duggan, I thought Max Duggan at least lost in a more valiant way. He gave everything he had and he was a lot closer to winning. But it was the second time TCU had played K-State this year. And in the rematch, K-State got him. K-State finally beat TCU. And it's the first time TCU lost all year. They went 12-1, which is, it stings, man. It's really bad. TCU had such an incredible, fun year. And for them to not finish undefeated is really, really unfortunate and sad for them. However, they still made it into the college football playoff, actually, which is pretty wild. When both number 3 ranked TCU and the number 4 ranked USC lost, I just automatically assumed that number 6 ranked Alabama and number 5 ranked Ohio State were going to both move up and take the 2 spots and both get elevated. And close, but not quite. Despite losing one game, TCU actually held their position 3rd in the college football playoff ranking. Ohio State moved up, replaced USC, but Alabama did not move up. And I loved that because I felt so bad last weekend. Going into last weekend, I said I'm rooting against TCU. And I felt bad saying that, but I just felt like it was wrong for Ohio State to miss out and not make it into the college football playoff, because I genuinely believe that this Ohio State football team is one of the 4 best teams in the country. And, I'm glad TCU made it in. They had such a fun, amazing year full of crazy wins and crazy moments. I think what happened for me was it was just unthinkable that USC was going to lose. I did not even once consider the fact that maybe Utah was going to beat USC, which is kind of laughable now because they already beat them earlier in the year. But I just really thought Ohio State deserved a spot in the top 4. I figured the only way for Ohio State to break into the top 4 was for TCU to lose. It was the most likely team to lose. I could not have imagined USC was going to lose or that both of them would lose. And, the top 4 now is Georgia, Michigan, number 3 TCU, number 4 Ohio State. And I love that because, one more time, Ohio State to me is a top 4 team in college football. They were one of the 4 best teams in the country. The way it worked out, they lost to Michigan, so they couldn't play for the Big Ten title game. That's because the Big Ten is kind of dumb and has 2 different, the East and the West. If it was the 2 best teams in the Big Ten, you would have had Ohio State playing Michigan in a rematch, and maybe in the rematch, Ohio State would beat Michigan. You never know. So I think of the teams that could be ranked 4. Ohio State is the most likely to actually challenge Georgia of any team available. And so I'm really glad Ohio State made it in. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I just think that they deserve it. And here's how you justify TCU getting in very easily. You go, well, even though TCU lost the Big 12 title game to K-State, only 3 teams won 12 or more games this year. Georgia and Michigan went 13-0. TCU went 12-1. No other team won more than 11 games in college football. And they went to a conference title game. I think you can easily justify TCU. They deserve it. They earned it. I think the way TCU is built on offense is very similar to Purdue, actually, with a more mobile quarterback. So I think Purdue gave Michigan an interesting battle in the Big Ten title game. I think similarly, I don't know that TCU is going to beat Michigan, but I think they're going to score. I think it's going to be interesting and fun, and I'm excited for that. I think that TCU is actually an interesting matchup for Michigan. I'm so glad that both TCU and Ohio State got in. You know, Alabama to me was totally undeserving. I thought Alabama was going to leapfrog TCU when TCU lost, and I was so sad. Can you imagine if the top 4 in the college football playoff were Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama? How boring that would have been to have the usual suspects, the teams we have every year. 2 Big Ten teams, 2 SEC teams. Oh, of course, Alabama's back. Everyone would have rolled their eyes. They were a 2-loss football team. Plus, they barely beat Texas. I don't know. It would have been 2 rematches also. Georgia played Alabama earlier this year. Ohio State already played Michigan. That's the way it would have worked out is Ohio State would have been ranked ahead of Alabama. It would not have been good for college football to have those 2 rematches and only 2 conferences representing them. And Alabama just did not deserve it, in my opinion. So I'm really glad we got the top 4 we did. TCU getting in is awesome. In spite of their loss, I'm glad they're there. I did not fathom a reality where USC lost. Blind spot for me. I just totally assumed. They were gifted a crazy opportunity. USC was handed another chance to make it in. And they blew it, which I'm glad, though, because I genuinely think Ohio State deserved to get in. And if, Michigan, Georgia, TCU, and USC had all won, Ohio State would have missed out, and that would have been a bigger tragedy. Like, when it came down to it, I all weekend talked about how I want to see TCU lose because I want to see Ohio State get in, and USC is going to be more fun. But I cared more about Ohio State getting in than I cared about TCU losing. I wasn't rooting against TCU. I just thought it was right for Ohio State to get in. And my brain got tunnel vision, and I didn't see a way in for Ohio State other than TCU losing. And what happened was even more bizarre and more unexpected. But I like the Final Four we got. It's awesome. And 4 deserving teams. But again, we need expansion. I'd love to have even more teams so there isn't this weird debate and this uneasy feeling like, is there a team being left out? And I also think there's teams playing in bowl games that don't matter and aren't as interesting. I want a bigger college football playoff. I know it's coming. I can't wait for that day. I just think it's going to be good for the sport and make it even more interesting come the end of the year. Replacing more boring bowl games with interesting, meaningful matchups. I love that thought. So I'm excited for college football playoff expansion, but the top 4 we got, I'm grateful for, and I really like it. And, the fact that Ohio State got in feels like justice and feels right to me, and it makes me very, very happy.